What's up everyone, John from ARTV. It's time for a review of the highly anticipated third studio album Love Is Dead by the Scottish synthpop trio Chvrches. Chvrches are one of my favorite bands of the 2010s, and I caught onto them with their single The Mother We Share in 2013. It's one of my favorite songs of all time, perfect melodies, and I loved this synth-pop aura that they just vibrated. And then with their debut album The Bones of What You Believe, the love was only furthered. They continued to foster that in my heart with 2015's Every Open Eye as they built upon what they had found in the past, but also took it up a notch with the pop gems and also the emotional depth. But on this new album, Love Is Dead, they take on a little bit more of a universal approach in terms of both songwriting and just the lyrics, the musicianship in general. Much of that is thanks to, obviously, Greg Kurstin producing Love Is Dead and working with them, and you might know Greg Kurstin for being one of the most renowned producers of this century. He's worked with everybody from Kelly Clarkson to Lily Allen, and even the Foo Fighters on their recent album Concrete and Gold. Was I worried about the sound that they would put out with this new record working with Kurstin? A little bit, sure, and did it pay off? Well, yes and no. You may have seen my review of the lead single Get Out, and while I did have my criticisms of it, especially that repetitive chorus that was still fun but still felt a little bit underwritten, a problem that does continue on this album, I enjoyed the song and I found myself coming back to it. I liked some of the lyrical parts and I liked the mention of the kaleidoscope. Show me why you are a kaleidoscope. Something that shows many colors, and as you see the album art for Love Is Dead, it kind of pushes that theme once again, and even the opening track Graffiti, which is very colorful. I like that, and a lot of people were talking like, oh, it looks like a vaporwave cover, and while I've never really talked about vaporwave on my channel or anything like that, I don't feel like the music just relays that style and that theme of music. It's more of just a straightforward synth pop meets mainstream pop album. But hey, if you asked me to quickly sum up the sound of Love Is Dead, I would say colorful, because I do feel like that's an accurate depiction of what comes on this release. Starting with the opening track Graffiti, we get a monumental cut that is so much fun to listen to. Vibrant, colorful synthesizers, a synth line that you can almost reach out and touch, and a relatable feeling in the lyrical content. You can start to see that these tracks don't exactly seem introspective, but with moments like Graffiti, it depicts a relationship that seems like it was fleeting, as they reference time and how time is fleeting and how they felt like they had all the time in the world at one point in their life. Perhaps it might feel a little bit underwritten to some, but I don't feel like this is a good example of calling that out on Love Is Dead, because this cut is fantastic. Obviously, Get Out fits in that boat as well, despite opening up on a little bit more of a classic Chvrches sound with the way that the synthesizers have that buzz and tone about them, and in the pre-chorus how they break down to a little bit more of a tremble. But once that chorus hits, those drums just kind of pound and thunder in. I do feel like this one leans more in that colorful direction, and I really do like that Greg Kurstin actually plays the drums on the majority of this album, because as we continue going on, we see those additions and it's very nice, but not just the live drumming that's used on many of these tracks that we really hadn't seen from Chvrches in the past. It's something where they also bring in member Ian Cook to play guitars, and we see more bass, and more real bass I should say, on an actual guitar played on many of these cuts. Everything from Wonderland, Heaven Hell, Graves, many of these cuts even have a little bit of an electric guitar line that I'm detecting, like Wonderland for example, it feels like. While so much of this record does feel a bit more carefree and danceable, there's also darker moments as well, and I would say that one of those would be the compelling second single and the only other song that I heard before this album released, My Enemy, featuring the Nationals lead singer Matt Berninger. Now, my main complaint here was the fact that no, not that Matt sounds bad, it's just that what is he doing that member Martin Doherty of Chvrches couldn't do? Because in the past, we've seen him knock it out of the park with Under the Tide, and especially emotional high point from Every Open Eye, high enough to carry you over. And even on this very record, he does a master job with God's Plan. A very interesting cut that has a little bit of a Daft Punk leaning sound. It's like perhaps Daft Punk and early Chvrches had a baby together, maybe something like Science Visions, and they teamed up and this is the outcome in the form of God's Plan, which no, not a Drake cover. What I'm getting at is the fact that Martin does a more than capable job on his own tracks, and I always love it when he even teams up with Lauren Mayberry, the other singer from this band. But on My Enemy, we get Matt, and I suppose that's just fine. That's just a small little gripe that I had with it. Other than that, this is a mesmerizing cut that I truly get lost in. I love those synthesizers, and this one does feel a little bit darker, perhaps because it was just the trio that wrote this one. Greg Kurstin does have co-writing credits on the majority of this record, but on this track, it's just the trio, this one, and also God's Plan and Really Gone, and those are ones that truly stood out to me as sounding a little bit more classic Chvrches style. As we look back to the more colorful offerings of this record, we have cuts like Forever, which do get bogged down in repetition in a way, a complaint that I could say about many of these tracks, and people will just argue, oh, that's pop for you, but at the same time, I've heard plenty of pop choruses that have a lot of charisma to them, and they're not just repeating words and phrases. And not to really totally slam any of the tracks that do that on this very record, it's just that in places I know that Chvrches are capable of more, and I've heard some of their compelling choruses, many of their compelling choruses, and these do feel a bit underwhelming in places. But even something like Forever, I've found myself gravitating back towards it because I got a lot more listens into this record than I normally do thanks to being out of town, and it was a blessing in disguise in a way because this is one of those albums that does require additional listens for me. If Forever leans a little bit too much towards that mediocre appeal, then we can look to cuts like Deliverance or even Heaven, Hell, or Graves for more fascinating pop material. Graves does a great job because it has a very just colorful appeal to it. It's like lighting up or somebody just glowing or beaming when you look at them. And it seems like it has a lot of compassion to offer, and it has a very fun chorus that sticks like glue in your mind. And the verses are very well written and thought out as well. And then on Deliverance, that's a cut that I really enjoy, that vivid and sharp imagery that's used thanks to the lyrics of Mayberry. And here, she comes across with a little bit of a deeper register at the start of this track. And I love how she talks about a warning, essentially. Be careful with this, be careful with that, with the holy water, be careful with those that lure you in with these words and with these things, and they're going to try to convince you of this. And then it has that stomping drum rhythm that builds up to the chorus, and sure, it does get repetitive, but you're gonna find yourself grooving and vibing to it. Full-blown pop jams do occur, and they still ride the line between synth pop and mainstream pop, but it becomes most prominent and most notable on some of the tracks like Never Say Die and of course Miracle, which come back to back. And so many people were talking to me negatively about Miracle, and knowing my own rule, most of you probably do, I only listen to 2 songs before an album comes out, so I didn't hear Never Say Die or Miracle. And as I listen to these back to back now, in the context of this record, it's very much fun. It's something that you can dance to. I think that Miracle has a nice drop to it, but I can understand the complaints. But first, I will talk about Never Say Die. Does it feel underwritten? Absolutely. But is it meant to be fun at the same time? Yeah. So if you're looking for something that maybe feels a little bit more like Lauren Mayberry paired up with a DJ on a little bit more of a generic pop-leaning jam, then you can take it as that. But if you're looking at it in the context of Chvrches, I can understand why you'd have gripes with it. Never Say Die, however, is a lot of fun, even though it does have that didn't you say that, which can feel a little bit annoying at times, but I can say with repeated listens it has grown on me. And then you move into Miracle, which is one that much of the fan base was complaining about a lot, but at the same time a lot of people loved it and they felt like it was a total banger. And I think that I've leaned towards the side of it being a total banger. I think that Mayberry really unleashes here, and I think that the instrumental brings a huge sense of urgency in the sense that it's just like let go, let yourself get into the flow of the moment. I'm not looking for a miracle, Mayberry cries out here. And I feel like maybe people were expecting a little bit too much of this mainstream pop leaning sound, and I like that this track, even as it goes on, it has a great drop, but in its last half it truly builds up and its energy and inertia, and it just truly keeps pushing forward and doesn't let off that gas pedal. The most down-to-earth and human moment we get is Really Gone, and that's something where I really like Mayberry's performance. I think her vocals feel a bit subdued, but also very emotionally inclined, because much of this record, as I said, is very universal with its themes. It's not necessarily looking inward for problems or things to write about, but on this one, you can't help but feel like this one does feel a bit deeply personal, and I love that because some of Chvrches' best songs, like for example the lead single on the last album, was fantastic for that very reason. Leave a Trace was something that would smash down the walls of an abusive relationship, and Mayberry just found herself reclaiming her own life and her own power, and I love that. And on this one, I feel that once again with something like Really Gone. No, not in the sense that she's writing about the exact same things, it's just that she actually breaks down and feels very vulnerable here, and you just get that quiet synthesizer that quietly warbles in the background. You get that and her vocals, and you just can't help but love it. and then we smoothly transition into the album's last act. We get the instrumental cut 2, and then Wonderland. And not to discredit Wonderland whatsoever, because that's a fantastic pop jam, but I love the cinematic-leaning style of 2. That instrumental is totally engrossing, and I found myself lost in it, just entranced and wanting more. If they ever do like an expansion or B-sides or anything, I hope to hear more of this instrumental cut because it truly is compelling. And then obviously Wonderland, a fantastic synth pop jam that sees a lot of vivid imagery once again used, a lot of descriptiveness, and I like the fact that there's allusions obviously to Alice in Wonderland, something that's by no means new, but at the same time I don't feel like it's maybe too overused that they can't go there, and I think that Mayberry knocks it out of the park. And we also have to give a lot of credit to Doherty and Ian Cook for that warm bass and the guitar on this one, and also the synthesizers, the great chorus on this thing that hits you every single time. I really truly wrestled with the rating for this record. I went back and forth between 3.5 and 4, and I finally came to a decision just before recording this video, and I don't want you to think that I feel like this is a bad album. In fact, it's one that I truly highly recommend. I think it's definitely worth your time. But considering I gave both of their first 2 releases 4.5 out of 5, I have to give this a 3.5, a strong one out of 5. This is a step down in quality, songwriting overall. I don't always feel like the musicianship is top notch, and I do rate it based on what I feel the artist is capable of. And this just feels like a little bit of a grab at the mainstream, but at the same time, I do feel like they retained a lot of elements that made them who they are. But I want to know, what do you guys think? This is just my opinion. Sound off in the comments down below. Thanks a lot for tuning into my review of Love is Dead. Please drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Ring that bell so you get notifications. If you're able to, support me on Patreon at this annotation over in the corner of the screen or the top link down below. See another Chvrches video right over here and let me know if you want to see a top 10 soon. And over here you can see another recent video I did on the channel. Socials in the description, and I'll see you soon on ARTV.